Hey painting friends, it's Stoof here. Welcome back to my channel. We have made it to week 10 in month 3, I guess, of our 2026 weekly painting tutorials. So congrats, you guys have made it this far. If you've been around for every week, please let me know in the comments. I'm really hoping that somebody has. But if you're not, if you're brand new here, then welcome. This is my year of making one tutorial every single week, starting at the beginner level, using acrylic paints, and we're building up on our skills as we go. So if you are brand new to painting and you want to start back at the beginning, week 1 is like a silhouette of a palm tree on like a sunset beach. But today we're doing a lighthouse with some florals in the foreground because the theme this month is dreaming of springtime, so it's like got that like late spring summer vibe with the pretty lighthouse, some blue water there, and then pretty pink flowers. I'm not sure exactly what kind of flowers those are in the foreground. So before we get started on materials, let me give you guys a quick background on me. My name is Steph Moraca. My friends call me Stoof, so you guys can call me Stoof. That's my nickname. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Studio Arts from the University of Pittsburgh. I've been painting full-time as an artist since 2018, and I create realism-style landscapes of national parks, golf courses, other beautiful travel destinations, so lots of landscapes. And then I also do custom commissions of literally anything. And then I also do live wedding painting at weddings and at corporate events. I do live paintings for those too. So you can see more of my original art on my website, stephmaracaffineart.com. But going back in on today's lesson, let's look at our materials. So we have acrylic paints we're working with again. I have an 11 by 14 inch canvas panel. I have a disposable paper palette. And then for my paint colors today, I added a few more colors here. I'm going to show you that we can make a couple of these colors, but for like speed purposes, I just put more colors on the palette for making the lesson doable in an hour. But our colors today are burnt umber. This is called Titan Buff. It's just like a beige. This is just like a primary yellow. This is medium magenta, titanium white, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, cobalt blue, sap green, and phthalo green. And you can use more colors if you'd like, or you could bring it down to even fewer colors. If you need to use less colors, just make sure you still have a warm blue, a cool blue, a warm green, a cool green, a magenta or a cool purplish red, pink if you want to get the flowers that pink color, and then you would need white, obviously. These two colors you could make, but everything else we need. Okay, cool. So that's that, and then I didn't even pick out my brushes yet. Let's see. Let's use this filbert brush. That'll be a good one. I'm also going to use this larger angled brush to get things blocked in, and then I need a flat tip brush. Let's go with that guy. Okay, we'll use a number 2 flat tip brush. So these are similar brushes to what we used last week when I did a cherry blossom painting tutorial. You can use smaller brushes. You can use different size and types of brushes if you would like. This is just what I'm going to use for this tutorial. I do recommend having a filbert brush with that rounded top edge there. That'll help you with getting some of the soft petals on the flowers. And then at least a larger flat tipped or angled brush like this one. That'll help with getting some of the rocks, water, and sky painted in. And then the little brush, flat tip brush, is going to help me get some of the more detailed work in here. So, all right. We're ready to start the painting tutorial. I also have a cup of water, forgot to mention that, and I have some paper towels. So those are all helpful in creating this tutorial. Okay, so getting started. Also, if you guys hear like the sound of the rain in the background, we're getting some storms today, so hopefully I don't lose power while we're having our little tutorial session here. Okay, it's still recording, good. Okay, so I'm gonna put a little tick mark in the center point of my canvas. That's usually what I do while I'm looking at my reference photo, and I will have the reference photo for you guys here while I'm sketching this out, and then I'll take that reference photo away. So if you want to screenshot that reference photo on the screen, if it's on your computer or something, you can do that. And we are ready to get started here. So I got this, I put my tick mark right in the center of my canvas, and then I just hover my mouse on the center of my reference photo there, so I just match up center and center. Sometimes it helps if you do a little tick mark at the top and left and right just to get those 4 quadrants here. So as I'm sketching out the concept, I just take a little bit of water on my small brush and I just swirl a little bit of paint, blue paint with the water to thin it down a lot, and I usually just sketch it out with the thin down paint. So looking at my scene here, the feature that's striking out to me right now is that I'm going to sketch out first is like the flowers in the foreground. They basically take up the lower half of this painting, most of the lower half. So I'm just going to do like a little hill. So there's a little dip right at center, and then it kind of flattens out, comes down for a bit. There's a rock right here and a rock right there. Just very loosely sketching things out. And there's another little flower bush that's going a little farther off into the distance right there. And then a bigger plant bush over there. Okay, so there's our bottom half is sketched out already for the most part. Now, as we continue sketching out the scene, I'm gonna put, so about 1 inch above my center mark here. If you have working on the same size canvas, it's about 1 inch above that. And joining up right where these two met. So if this meets here left to right, about just a little past halfway between those two, where these two join, the angle is like 10 degrees, and then it steepens up to almost a 20-degree angle after it gets a little past here. So very shallow angle, and then it starts to get into more of a 20. So looking at our angles here, here's 0, here's about 20, and it comes past, so halfway between these two, it comes about almost an inch past that, and it's going to be up a ways more because of that angle. Okay, next I'm going to put a little tick mark about halfway between center and the top of the canvas, and then I'm looking where that is on here, and that is the top of the building there. So I've got a little angle, very shallow angle again, and that is about where the top, if you have this tick mark there, drag this out to the left part of the canvas, and that is about where this ridge comes off. So this is land right here, flattens out for a bit there, comes down, and about here it just goes like that. So this is a big strip of land. We've got some rocks down here, a little bit of green at the top, and then our lighthouse is just beyond that. So I'm just going to put this little bit of green, little marker to show where I have some grass on top. And then these are all going to be rocks. So this rock kind of sticks out a bit, and the water comes in a little more here. You can dip the brush in the water again if you need to. And again, right above center, this kind of comes in. There's just a little bit where the water comes in, and then that angle goes steeper there. A little bit of structure on the rocks, and then there's a large rock right here. Doesn't come quite as high as that. And there's some crashing waves there, little rock right there. Okay, now let's draw in or sketch in the lighthouse. So right in between these two, so tick mark here is, let me eye up, that right halfway between those two is where the left side of that lighthouse is, and then the top of the lighthouse comes to, so if you have this and you go halfway between these two spots, so you put this tick mark here to separate these into halves. If you break this down into halves, that is the top of the lighthouse, and it's going to be in a bit from that. So I'm just going to get the shape of this lighthouse first, and it's not super wide. It comes out at a very slight angle. It's not straight up and down, it gets a little bit wider, and then it comes in for a bit. This is like a little black section, and then here there's the light station part, and then there's a little peak right there. So that's in general the shape of my lighthouse. And we've got this little building here. I'm just gonna get that little triangle for the roof and little flat marks there. We've got a couple other little buildings here. So like I said, this point right here is the roof of one of the buildings. There's just a little gap in between those two. So about the width of this base is the width between these two. Maybe slightly smaller actually. Let's bring it just a hair closer. And it's got a very steep angle for that roof. Comes down, and then there's another little roof right there. Kind of goes in front of the lighthouse a little bit, or the light station tower. And then we've got the larger house part here, which has about a 50-degree angle roof. Maybe more like 45, so slightly less steep. And then comes out a bit. If you're looking at halfway between these two, you definitely don't want the house to come past this point. So we want our roof to come out a little ways. And then that angle is a bit steeper back there. And the roof comes down. Can't see much there. Comes out. There's another interesting shaped roof behind that one. A couple little fireplace pieces. And then if we want to go into more detail with the windows and stuff, we can do that later. But in general, there's the sketch for the lighthouse. And there's a little window right there. Okay, so that's the sketch of the lighthouse. For the sky in the background, that's gonna be pretty simple. I got that little building there, and then I'm gonna put a nice little, dip my brush in the water again, put a nice little horizon line that's kind of coming up. It's flat behind that guy, and there's a little bit of an island or more land, maybe more land visible back behind there. And that's the general concept. I'm just going to block in where I want to have some little flowers. That was way too big of a flower. Just nudge that off. Okay, little flower there. And I'm going to have another little flower right here. You can put flowers wherever you want. I'm just kind of copying where they are in my reference photo. One under here. And I'm just very, quickly blocking in the shape of these flowers. Another couple flowers down here. Little guy down here. I got that one. I got this guy. And then as the flowers are getting farther away, they're getting smaller. That's going to help to create the depth in our painting. So make your flowers smaller as they're coming back this way. And they might seem closer together as well because they're farther in the distance. Okay, like that. Might add a couple flowers later because I think this area is a little too green with no flowers. I'm going to add a flower right here. Another flower down here. And there's one more right in there. Do I add one here? I think I will. One little guy right there. Okay, cool. That's pretty. And now we can start working on the painting. So I'm going to start with my large angled brush. Making sure we're still recording. It looks good. And I'm going to use my cobalt with white. Cobalt blue, white, and a little bit of phthalo blue. And I'm gonna get more white and just paint that in for the sky. So I take some of the paint, I start a new spot where I'm gonna swirl all the paint on the palette here. And I just flip it and swirl it around, flipping both sides of the brush just to get nice, good, even coverage on the brush. Let's do a little bit more cobalt. And I'm going back and forth with the brush on the canvas. Just filling that all in. And then I'm gonna take a little bit more white and cobalt. Just put that all on the sky. Filling it in and taking more white, and I'll do a little bit of phthalo blue here. We'll take a teensy bit of phthalo green and start to block that in. So I put the paint down and then I work my way up. Put the paint down, going right up to my features here. Because we're using acrylic paint, we have to kind of work quickly so that it doesn't dry. We can get a bit of a blended look for the sky. So I'm just doing that. I was holding the brush this way to get nice coverage, and then when I want to show like some sweeping clouds, I can just take some white and do like like this, hold the brush at different angles, and then just keep picking it up. And I'm going over my lighthouse a little bit, but that's okay because we're gonna come back to it, so no big deal. So now I get that nice look of some little cirrus clouds up in the sky. Add a little bit more white. Got a little streak of blue in there, and I didn't want that, so I just kind of taking that out. Okay, and then I'm gonna take more white with a little phthalo green and go down to the horizon line here. Again, just going right up to those buildings. Covering it up just a little bit. I'm trying to be a little bit more cautious where I had my building part sketched out with the house, because that's going to be a little trickier to repaint. And just thickly applying the paint, going right down to my horizon line. So that's all on there now. I'm just going to get the extra paint off my brush on my paper towel, and now I'm just going and I'm blending this up. Blending, back and forth. Blending it up. All right, and just like that, we've got our sky done. I'm just lightening things up even more near the horizon line. All right. Looks good. Okay, next I'm gonna work on, I could go a bunch of ways here. I'm gonna let this area dry, so I'm not gonna touch those buildings just yet. I'm gonna work on the rocks. So I'm gonna take my Titan Buff color, which, by the way, you can make something close to this, mixing your yellow and a little bit of your crimson and a little bit of sap green. Let's just see what that gives us. A little bit more crimson. And then some white. And then maybe a hint more yellow. So you can get something like close. It's not quite the same color as that, but it's pretty close. So like I said, you don't need that color, but it doesn't hurt. And then I'll mix a little bit of brown in there too. And you can get a color close to brown by mixing your red and green, maybe a bit of yellow. You might have to warm it up a bit, but you can get something close to that. And then I'm gonna mix in a little bit of my cobalt blue just to cool this down, because it's a little farther in the distance from us, so it's gonna be picking up some of the atmosphere blues, and it's not gonna be pure warm beige. Just blocking in this for my base here real quick. Covering up this whole section with the larger brush. Okay, and the top of this rock also has some of this color. And there's a little bit of something like this color here. It's a bit darker, but we just got that blocked in for now. Okay, now I'm gonna take more brown and a little bit of my cobalt and some of my crimson. A little bit more brown, maybe a bit of phthalo. Just trying to get like a purplish, brownish color. Mix a little bit of green. All right, and then this color is gonna go up here. And so you want to look at the value. You don't want it to be too dark just yet, because this is kind of far in the distance. There are some deeper shadows in here, but the photograph, your shadows always end up getting a little deeper in a photograph than they look in real life. And photos end up flattening things out when you look at them. So by making some adjustments from what you're seeing in a reference photo to your painting, you can make your painting look more realistic than a photo, even have more depth than a photo at least, by following the rules of depth and keeping your values from getting too deep when things are in the background. All right, so here I just mixed umber, a little bit of phthalo, and a little bit of magenta, and a little bit of cobalt blue. And now I can darken up some of the shadows a bit. So I'm just gonna make things a little bit darker, still not too dark because we're kind of far away. And I'm just taking this brush at an angle and adding some of my little shadows to some of these rocks here. I can add a little bit more magenta to some of them. They don't have to all be the same color. We don't want them all to be exactly the same color and value. I want to have some variety. A little bit more cobalt for this area. More shadows. And I'm going to take more umber and crimson down here. Okay, so that's a bit too warm, so I'm gonna mix in some cobalt. I wanna get like more of a purple brown right now, so I mixed a little bit of my magenta in there as well. And these are the rocks that are like wet right by the water. Maybe they've got some staining from the ocean spray. I'm just gonna get this is all right around the section where the rock meets the water. Here, kind of comes up a bit. Basically just this lower section. Mix a little bit of Titan buff in there, a little bit more crimson, a little bit of yellow. And just playing around with these sections here, quickly blocking stuff in. I'm gonna mix a little bit more of my cobalt in there. And you don't have to like try so hard to get these rocks perfectly detailed like they look in the picture, because this isn't the focal point. The rocks, the lighthouse is the focal point. So as long as you can like imply that there are rocks here, it doesn't have to look exactly like the rocks in your reference photo. Just have like a variety of little brush strokes and lines, a couple little shadows, and that's really all you need to get it to look like you've got the rocks here. I'm putting a couple little highlights on the rocks right at the edge. I'm gonna do a little bit more pure brown for these ones closer to the viewer. Okay, I'm liking that a lot. A little bit more cobalt and Titan buff as we're getting there. And then you can add a couple little highlights. I just got the extra paint off my brush. I'm just gonna take Titan buff with a little bit of the sky color mixed in, and this will more Titan buff and some white too. Actually, let's lighten that up even more, and we'll just add our highlights. So a few of these rocks, this is what will help give these rocks more depth. Just adding some highlights using my angled brush. So wherever you have a shadow, just add a couple little highlights to the right side of those shadows, and that is going to help to give you, like, do a flat and then bring it down, flat, bring it down a bit. Could add a bit more yellow to some of these. Carrying it out, and I'm using barely any pressure here just to try to show little highlights. I'm not trying to do super thick brush strokes here, but it looks pretty nice already. I think this is a nice one. I like this one more than last week's already. Last week's that I did 2 days ago. The cherry blossoms. I like this more than that. Okay, let's see. What do you guys think? Do you guys, yeah, if you have done a few of these, let me know Which one has been your favorite so far? Curious. And which one was your least favorite? All right, so getting more cobalt and umber, magenta, and just darkening up some of my shadows on this rock again. Okay, and I'm gonna clean off my brush. Now I'm gonna start to add the water. So I just dipped it in, I dipped my big angled brush in the water, and now I'm just dipping it onto my paper towel to clean that off. And now I'm gonna mix some of my phthalo blue and a little bit of my red and a little bit of my sap green. And then some white. And a little cobalt too, because that's a little bit too warm. Okay, and this color is going to go back here. Maybe a little bit more white even, a little bit more cobalt. Okay, this color is going right back here at the horizon line, and I am going to lighten that up even more now that I'm looking at that down on the canvas. All right, going right up to the edges of the rock. So here I don't want to paint over the rocks too much because I'm just defining the edge of my rock. Okay, and then I'm going to take my little brush, now that that's on there, and just take some white, blend it on the brush, both sides of it, and just go back and forth gently over that horizon line and just do a couple little brush strokes pulling this out. That's going to help to make that look farther in the distance. And I want it to be flat. Right now it's kind of angled. And it's okay to have this nice and soft so that you almost can't even tell where the horizon meets the sky. Just keep going back over that spot and that'll soften everything up. Just trying to make it horizontal at this point. A little bit more white. And back and forth we go. All right, so that looks nice there. And then for a little bit of land that's back there, I'll just use some of this greenish color that I made. And we'll just put this right here. Actually, I want that even lighter, so I'm just gonna mix in a bit of my sky color and my cobalt. And just put that there. So now we can see that there's a bit of land. Okay, and then as we're moving closer up here, I think I'm gonna use this small brush still while I'm working on this area right in here. And I'm gonna put this color right in between the rocks so I can get the rock edges defined. And we've got some broken up waves in here too. Okay, so that area is good. Now I can go back to my colors. I'm gonna mix some phthalo green and just fill this in right here, all with that nice phthalo green. Back and forth with the brush. Gonna mix more of my phthalo blue and a little bit of crimson in this area. Kind of pulls in there. This is where it gets a bit deeper, darker. A little bit of brown can get in there too. A little bit of your magenta. Okay, and then down here I'm gonna mix some of my yellow. Woo! More of my yellow and my Titan buff. Some magenta. More yellow, more magenta. More yellow. That's closer to what I'm looking for. A little bit more white, and then we'll do some brown. Oh, there was some blue in there. White, okay, and just come right down here. Get a little bit of this warmer color in the water. Just a little bit there. I'm gonna get the extra paint off my brush. And now I'm actually gonna switch to my filbert medium brush. Use some phthalo green. I just mixed it in with that phthalo blue a bit. And we'll mix a little bit of yellow and a little bit of umber. More phthalo green and white. And we'll just get this going right over some of these spots. This area here is nice and light. Back and forth with the brush. And just quickly blocking this all in. gonna blend a bit with our other colors here. Put a little bit of our deeper browns. Let's go back and forth. Okay, and then this is even lighter right here. Mixing more white with my phthalo, a little bit of yellow. I love painting the ocean colors, like it's so pretty. Okay, that's good. Actually, I'm gonna do a little bit of that right where we've got the splashing waves. Just blend that in. Okay, and then I'm gonna take my smaller brush and I'm gonna do some of the white with a little bit of cobalt is in there. And just go right up to the rocks and pushing the paint around using a good amount of pressure. That's helping to get me that look like some breaking waves are happening here. And we're just starting out with this base color. We can add some highlights later, but for now we're just getting the base, just pushing the paint to give me that broken waves look. Add a couple little waves in here. Couple, oh yeah, it goes in right here, the water, a little bit, right up to the shore. And another bit of waves right there. Take a little bit of brown and just let that glide over, pushing the paint around. Okay, and then a little bit more of that right in here. Broken up and just pushing it around. Gives you that look of breaking waves or like suds. Okay, looks good. And then for the bottom part, I'm gonna start out with just my sap green. There's a little bit of blue and a little bit of crimson, a little bit more phthalo. And I wanna just get like a nice deep blue and just fill in all the spaces around, maybe a little bit of brown. Fill in all the spaces around my flowers. And once we get this all filled in, then the next step will be to, oops, still recording, yeah, okay. The next step after this will be to just let that dry while we start to fill in some of the flowers, or we could actually work on the lighthouse next. So I'm gonna just fill this space all in here, and once that's filled in, we'll let that shadowy green dry. I think it's just the fastest, easiest way to just fill in this whole area with the shadowy green and then add some highlights and more leaves on top of it. And then once you get to the top here, you can just like make a couple little boop, 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 like crisscross brush strokes, and that'll help to give that broken up top of the hedge look. More red and green, filling in all the space. Okay. And there we go. And I just mixed a little bit more of my other greens in there as well. My phthalo green got mixed in a bit. That's okay. We do have a bit of that in here as well. Just doing those broken up little looks here. Okay, and that's good. Okay, everybody say hi. She just woke up from her nap, but that's okay. I got you a snack. All right, we're gonna continue. All right, so next I'm just gonna block in back here. I'm just gonna use a little bit more yellow. So it's a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit more cobalt. And I'm just gonna fill in this whole area, and I can go back and add the flowers on top later. But that just shows that this is a little farther away than this. Okay, putting the big brush away for the rest of the time here. Now we're gonna use our smaller flat tip brush, and I'm gonna work on the lighthouse, I decided. So we're gonna start with the roof. So the roof is a mix of crimson and umber and yellow. there's what we got. And this is for the part of the roof that's more in the sun, and then there's a part of the roof that's more in the shade. It's going to mix a little bit more of my phthalo blue with my crimson and my green, and a little bit more brown for the part that's in shadow. Maybe a little bit of my Titan buff just to lighten it up a bit. Okay, so highlight, shadow. So this part is in shadow here, so I'm just going to start by getting the flat part of the roof and that angle coming down. And again, if you guys want to use more brushes here, if you want to use finer brushes, that'll help you get more detail. I'm just using like a budget-friendly flat tip #2 flat brush, so mine's not going to be perfect, but it's going to get painted. It's going to be in the painting. Okay, and then we've got a line here for that one. Okay, and then I'm not seeing a whole lot of this color other than this one right here at this angle, and then a bit more at this angle on that. Okay, now for the lighter one, I'm just gonna mix a little bit of white in there as well. And we got that painted in there. We got that blended, so let me add the colors here. There's a bit of a section where this roof stands out, and then we've got this little awkward shaped roof in the back. It's kind of like a dome, but not. I'm not sure what that angle is on that roof. Okay, and then here we've got this one. I'll mix even more white in there. Just comes right down. Just carefully painting this in. This is the more detailed part of the painting because this is our focal point, so we want to put a little extra care into making this accurate. All right, looking good. Okay, and there are my roof pieces. They're just, I forgot my little chimney stumps. Okay, there's that. And then this one here is a little bit lighter value. I'm gonna mix a little bit more of my yellow and crimson and white and get that roof painted in. This part is in the sun. And this part's in shadow. Okay, a little bit more brown right there. Let's make this come almost down to the bottom. And then this part's nice and light. Use more white right here. Even a little more white. Go right up to under the roof and down. Okay, looks good. And then I just need a little shadow for the lip under the roof here. Okay, that looks nice. Okay, now I'm gonna clean off my brush because we're done with that brownish color. Dip it in the water, clean it off on the palette, and now I'm gonna start to work on the whites. So my whites in shadow, I'm gonna use cobalt with white. And maybe we're gonna see, I might need to do a touch. I'm gonna do a touch of crimson and a touch of yellow, and this is gonna get me more of a grayish blue. All right, right, and then we're gonna put that color. So looking at my values here, this is right, because I want my lighthouse to be darker in value, this part of it at least, to be darker in value than the sky behind it. So see how this is a darker than what's behind it, and that is gonna help it to stand out in the scene and look more realistic. Okay. Let's pull in these shadows down, going all the way down. And I'm seeing if I see that color anywhere else. There's a bit of that under here, under the roof lip. A little bit under this roof, and a little bit under this roof. All right, now I'm gonna take my white, just pure white, and I'm just gonna blend it a little bit into that color I just had, and I'm gonna get like a nice middle value and put that right there. And my daughter just threw one of my canvases down to the first floor. R.I.P. that canvas. Yeah, the gecko's getting water right now. All right, and we've got pure white for this right side that's in the light. If you want to get really fancy with it, you could warm it up a bit if you had like a Naples yellow. I wouldn't use too much of this yellow though, that might be too yellow. But a Naples yellow is a bit more neutral. So we'll put that white down, and then I'm very softly going and just blending it. And there's our lighthouse. I'm actually gonna add a little bit more white, just to thicken this up, widen it just a bit. There we go. All right, that looks good. And then there's a little highlight here because there's a rim. So I'm just gonna add that little rim right there, and then there's a little shadow under the rim. So I take the same thing, just go right under it with your shadow color. And it's not perfectly flat, it has like a little bit of a curve. Okay, and then let's use this white for our parts of the house. Just filling in all this space here. Going right up to my roof. And white is, titanium white's like a translucent color, so sometimes things show through a bit. So you might need to layer it up a bit more or start to blend a little bit of your other colors in there. I just put a teensy bit of yellow in there. All right, looking good. And then we can't really see much on this side. There is actually some of this little lip in shadow, so I just got some of my shadow color there. And I'm just gonna do a little bit of this right here because I know that's under there. We just can't see much of it. Okay, there's another little shed back there. I'm gonna omit that. Good, and now I can add my little my little windows. So I just mixed some of my cobalt blue with that shadow brown color I had. And I'm gonna dip this brush in the water so I can just thin it down and get a little bit more control with my brush strokes here. So there's that tiny little window there. We've got a window here, here. I'm just doing like one little brush stroke. Trying to keep it pretty simple. There's actually a little section there I see that I missed. A little bit of a shadow here. Tiny window up there, 2 windows. Right under here. And then a window there, there. A little bit wider out than those 2. Okay, and then a couple shadows for windows in here. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back to that color and add a little white section of roof visible there. And then my little window on there. Okay. Looking good. Let me just touch that up real quick. Good. All right, so now that's looking nice. I'm gonna use, I gotta make like a color that's close to black now. So I'm gonna mix my phthalo blue with my crimson and a little bit of yellow. And that's gonna get me a nice dark color that you can play around with it until you get something that looks like a nice neutral black. If it looks too blue, obviously you gotta add more red and yellow. If it's looking too red, you probably gotta add more blue or yellow. All right, I'm pretty happy with how that looks right now. It's not perfect, but we're just gonna leave that there. And now I'm just gonna do my little section of the lighthouse here. So we've got this little lip. And not having true black is pretty good because this is not right in front of the viewer at this point, this part of the lighthouse. So if you were to use just a pure black here, it would look too dark for how far away that is. So you don't want to use a pure black. There's that little section there, and we've got our little triangle at the top, and there's a teeny little thing coming out the top there. Okay, now I can touch up this area, just mix a little bit more of my color that's like the sky. Doesn't have to be a perfect match. Just go right up to the edges there. And then you've got playing with the canvases. And then you've got this nice little light station section. And I'll just go over a couple little things there. All right, pretty happy with that. And just adjust that angle a little. Yeah, looks nice. Okay, so last couple things we gotta do here. Just gonna touch up this one rock. Here, should come out a bit further. And I'll highlight that a little more. Okay, just to cover up my sketch. Okay, now I'm gonna use some of my sap green with a little bit of yellow and a little cobalt blue. Mix some more white. And just cover up all of this space with this brush, small brush. This is where we've got some greens kind of blocking a lot of the view of the bottom part of this. Can mix in more yellow, a little bit of brown. As we're getting farther down here, maybe a little bit more brown and yellow. And just covering up all the rest of that white space, and you can add a couple little spots here and there where you want to have some of your greens. Kind of on a lip. Mix in a little bit more brown and blue. Cover up all that white space. Adding a little bit more brown and blue at the undersides. There. Okay, a little bit more highlight up here. And then you can add more yellow and white to give you more of a highlight. Some of these bushes. Okay, that's looking nice. And then down here, last things we're gonna do are just touch up these flowers here. So you can add more white, a little bit of phthalo green, and more of the yellow. I'm gonna get some more yellow out. And I'm just gonna add some quick little leaves using this color. Remember, the leaves back here are gonna be a little smaller, so smaller brush strokes. And we have a section where things are highlighted from the sun, and then sections that are more in shadow. So make sure you leave gaps where you can have some of the leaves be more in shadow. Mix a little bit more phthalo green in there. What'd you find? A sticker. Wow. Yeah, sticker. Got some leaves coming off of this one. I'll do another one right there. And I dip the brush in the water a bit just to get some quicker, little more controlled brush strokes. One more yellow. And some more little ones there. A bit more phthalo blue. I'm playing with the charging cable. You want to play with your coloring? Yeah, get your colors. See the crayons? Okay, getting more of my little highlights placed in here. Couple more right in there. And that's looking pretty good. Okay, so now to get some deeper shadows, I'm gonna mix my sap green with my blue and some crimson. More sap green. And we'll get some really deep shadows in here. The foreground's gonna have really deep dark shadows. So I'm just kind of going around and dribbling the brush, scribbling, not going into too much detail. It's again, the focal point is gonna be our lighthouse. So we don't have to spend too much time on this part. This is more of like, as long as your values and colors look accurate, people are gonna be like, oh, okay, yeah, we've got some pretty plants right before the view of the light station. Hi, what you doing? Are you hiding? Where's Cece? Where'd she go? Okay, and then a couple more bright highlights on the leaves are gonna come. I'm gonna use the filbert brush next though. Just really cleaning that brush off well, because the last time I used it was for the water. And I'm going to take magenta and a little crimson. A little bit of my other colors got in there. That is way too muddy of a purple. I want more just like crimson with magenta. That's better. Okay, and I'm just gonna put this in a couple spots. Basically everywhere I have a flower, I'm just gonna add some of this. And as you can see, it's translucent, this color, so you can kind of see what's behind it. And that's why I'm putting this down first, because it's just gonna be a nice little marker or a base, just like I did for the grasses in the foreground. I started with the shadows, and then I built up more highlights and other colors after. So some of these are gonna have a bit more of that reddish, some a bit more pink. This one down here is actually gonna have a little bit more blue because it's in shadow. This one's got some parts in shadow down there too. Okay. Cover these all up. And just filling this one in too. What you got? Got a Tupperware. Covering up all my white space now, and I'll just add a few more little ones back here. Remember, these guys are going to be smaller and a little closer together because they're farther in the distance. Just have this go right over to the edge. looking good. And now I will let that dry for a bit, and I'm gonna come back and do some highlights on my plants, the leaves. So I'm gonna take more yellow and some Titan Buff color and a little bit of sap green and a little more Titan Buff. I'll dip that in the water a little, and we'll just add some highlights here. So these highlights are gonna be pretty bright. More yellow, there we go. And so your highlights are just gonna be on a few spots. So you had like a middle tone where you added that other green over the dark green. Now you're just gonna add some highlights to portions of those. So not fully covering all of them. Again, if you have any more little white spaces that need covered up, that's a great time to do that with this highlight. You can cover up some of the flowers a little bit because they're not all gonna be perfectly visible to the viewer. You can hold the brush at different angles to get smaller. Brush strokes to show little highlights. Hi, what'd you find? Oh, a piece of paint, thank you. Dried paint. Thank you for not eating it. Okay, and then just a couple more little spots here. And you can use even more yellow in the foreground to help these separate a bit more. Hi, you want to sit with me? Come here. Let's go. You're watching Mama, almost done. Yeah. Paint. Can you say paint? Oops. Say paint. Paint. Good job. Hold on, I was almost done. I'll let you work on this after. Okay. That's good. You can add a couple little kind of like semi-highlights by mixing crimson with your phthalo green, a little bit of sap green, a little bit of white. So they're like muted down greens, maybe a hint of yellow, and maybe a little bit more phthalo green. And then under here you can just have a few more, just gives a little bit more dimension. Okay, and then our last thing, just gonna touch up this rock. Here, we'll do that real quick. Rock. Can you say rock?
Rock.
Good job.
Rock.
Rock. Rock, rock, rock.
Rock. Rock.
Rock. Okay. Looks good. Okay, last thing, we just gotta add some highlights to our flowers. So we'll take some magenta, maybe a little bit of yellow, and white, and we can add our highlights. So just go down to some of these flower petals and add your highlights. Just add a couple little, hold on one second, make sure we're still going here. Okay, looks good. Okay, highlights. There's one. And we're almost done. All right. So we're wrapping up here. These are just the last couple little touches to get this painting done. I just want to say thanks for joining us, and my apologies for a little bit of the chaos in this tutorial. It's a part of my life as being a mom and an artist at the same time, so sometimes I just gotta paint and hold the baby. And we're almost done. Just one more little thing here. Boop. Yeah, you touching the painting? There we go. then yeah, you can play around with this. Like if you want to do more to it, you could add more detail to the foreground if that's something that you want to do. I don't think it's necessary. Like we said, the focal point is the lighthouse. If you want to add a little bit more ripples to the water, you can do that. But in general, hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you have recommendations for other tutorials you want to see, or if you have questions about this one, please leave a comment below. Please be kind in the comments because I know this was a little bit of a chaotic one. And thanks for bearing with me. Okay, have a wonderful day and happy painting. Bye-bye. You say bye-bye? Bye-bye.